Good day, folks, and welcome to Quarry Side Chat, where we interview Freemasons and discuss topics about the past, present, and future of Freemasonry in the 21st century. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are the sole opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversation open to the public and on the level. Today, we again have Brother Christopher Earnshaw, PhD. He did a lecture with us last week on Chinese Masonry and its relationship. Today, he will be doing a lecture with us on spiritual Freemasonry and the alchemy of Freemasonry, as well as he's written two books, which he will explain to us what they are about and what the purpose of his books are in his mind with regards to Freemasonry. Christopher is a past Grand Historian of the Grand Lodge of Japan. He's the past master of the Research Lodge of the Grand Lodge of Japan. He's also a Scottish Rite 33 degree IGH, chairman of Educational Committee, and lecturer of School and Social Sciences, Waseda University, Tokyo, and the former professor of Asian Studies, Daito Bunkai University in Tokyo. So, Christopher, here's to you.
Thank you very much. I've written 4 books, talk about the second degree, which I call Spiritual Alchemy, and the third degree, which is the quest for immortality. The third degree is actually covered in more depth, particularly the arcana of the ritual, the hidden part of the ritual is in the 4th book, the Royal Arch. This is the 1/3 of the book is about Royal Arch. Many people call the Royal Arch the 4th degree. I do not agree. And so I put my reasons in here. And then the rest of the book is all about the secret alchemy of the 3rd degree. So I have a quick presentation, which I'd like to share with you. I think I know how to work it now. Yes, and then go boom. Okay, whoop. Yep. Okay, spiritual Freemasonry. So my prime interest in Freemasonry is 2 things. One is, what was the intention of the first 3 Grand Masters when they started the Premier Grand Lodge in 1717. The Premier Grand Lodge later became the Grand Lodge of England about 1730 or 35, and later in 1813 became the United Grand Lodge of England, which is our current Grand Lodge. So why were they interested? Let's do the next picture. So this is a picture. Looks a little bit out of focus. Sorry about that. Oh, back. I can't go back. Can I go back? I can go back. So at the time, there was a lot of social issues and problems in England. Yes, and I didn't really put them in order, but this is what London looked like in 1753, it says down here. Is it 53? Yes. And one of the main focal points here is, of course, St. Paul's Cathedral. This is the old Westminster Cathedral, which was built about 1000 AD, so 1000 years ago. The other interesting thing to notice about this, and my mouse keeps dying on me. What's my mouse got? Oh, here we are. Is the London Bridge. And it's kind of symbolically, and St. Paul's is on this side. St. Paul's is an Anglican Christian cathedral. On this side, this is Southwark Cathedral, which was a Catholic cathedral. And you can see also another one here and another one there. So you had 3 cathedrals on the left bank. We call it the South Bank. And here you can see at least 20 church steeples. So there was a kind of religious fervor in England at the time. By the way, this here is called the Monument, and it's to commemorate the Great Fire of 1666. In my last book, called Freemasonry Royal Arch, I said this is a symbol of Freemasonry because it connects the Catholics on one side and the Anglicans on the other side. And we're going from a 2-degree ritual with the 2 towers to a 3-degree ritual with the 3 towers. So it's just a kind of symbolism for my series. Okay. One of the problems we had in England was to do with alcohol. And King William III, who was a consort to Queen Mary II, he was Dutch, and he wanted the English to stimulate the English economy. So he introduced juniper berries from Holland, the Netherlands, and using low quality grains in England, you were able to make gin. Gin is an abbreviation for Jennifer, which itself is an abbreviation for juniper, the juniper berry that they were using. So we called it in England Queen Jennifer, which came gin in England. And one of the problems about it was that, yes, it stimulated the economy, but there was no control about who could make it, and anyone was allowed to make it. A lot of women were making it in their kitchens as a kind of side business. And the consequence is that the price became, there's oversupply, the price came down, and everybody was drinking it. For example, this woman here, she was so drunk, she just lets a child fall into the basement here. There's a soldier here who's starving. He just drinks all the time. He's got a cup in his hand. There's a carpenter here selling his sword. There's a poor person and a dog fighting for a bone because they got nothing. Dead people being carried off here and here. There's a suicide hanging from the rafters up here. This is the pawnbrokers, so yes. All these, the detail is really wonderful, but it's just an indication of how bad the gin problem was in England. Another problem they had was to do with religion and superstition. So here we have a pulpit. This is, again, the last picture was by Hogarth, and this is also Hogarth. I love Hogarth's pictures because of the detail, and it's always to do with some social issues. So we have a priest up here, and he's got a devil in one hand and a witch in the other hand, and he's talking about witchcraft and all the other things. He's getting very excited because there's a kind of thermometer up here, and is measuring how his sermon is going along. It says at the top here is madness and lust, and at the bottom it says agony and despair, and he's in the middle. He's just lukewarm. He's just starting. On the left, this is a famous woman called Mary Taft. She was reputed to have given birth to rabbits. So it's another superstition. And this is the Cock Lane ghost. This man believes in, so they made these superstitious trinkets to protect them from ghosts, and he's forcing one on this woman here. I'm not sure what else is going. There's just so much detail, all these pictures around here. But one interesting thing here, this is meant to be a Muslim looking in the window. And we know that because Hogarth always puts a note at the bottom of his pictures explaining what's happening. And he said that the Muslim was looking in the window at despair at how low Christianity had fallen in England. So you got Christianity and witches and devils and superstitions and all sorts of nonsense going on. And that's what it was like at that time. Then we had the plague, and this is Plague Doctor. And plague didn't actually start in 1665. It started about 1610. Every year, about 5,000 people died of the plague in London. But then the numbers started to increase in the 1660s. 1665, I think it rose to about 60,000 people died in one year. Well, the population of London was only 500,000 people. So we're talking about coming on to 8% of the population dying. And they employed people with these masks on. And interestingly, he's got glasses, he's got window built in here, glass lenses. Why he had this long beak is because the beak was full of flowers, and they believed that the disease was spread by what they called bad air. So if you breathe in the bad air, you'll get the disease. So to stop the bad air, they put lavender, mainly lavender, but roses and rose petals in there, so he could breathe, good air. And interestingly, they also believed the eye was able to absorb the disease, and that's what we think about COVID now. That you can get the infection through the eye. It's very interesting. Anyway, so this is a plague doctor. So this is London at the time, and actually London was two cities. We call this just the city of London, and then to the left off the screen was Westminster City. And now Westminster and the city are joined as one big metropolis, but at the time there was about 2-mile gap of parkland and even wild land between the two, the Westminster to the left, mainly going along these two roads. This is Fleet Street, where now is all publishing. So in the center of the picture is St. Paul's Cathedral, and this here at the right is the Tower of London. Tower of London was a medieval palace, but later it was converted to a fort, and then for a long time it was used as a prison. One thing you can see here is a lot of white space. These are all farms and orchards, and some of them just say orchard up there growing things. And from here to from left to right is only about 1.5 miles. So from the center of the city, less than a mile out, you've got all these undeveloped areas. Very different now. So this is a picture of, it was painted after the Great Fire of London, but it shows where everything was. The next picture shows the Fire of London. And these are from here, St. Paul's, everything burnt down completely. The fire lasted about, this is 1666, the fire lasted about 3 days, and there's nothing left at all, completely. And there's a picture up here of just the smoke. Reality was even worse. The famous novelist and news reporter Samuel Pepys, he was on a boat, because everyone got on boats into the middle of the river to escape the fire. And he said that the sparks were raining down like fireworks onto his boat, and the sound of cracking wood. But luckily only less than 8 people were reported to have died in this. So thousands of houses were lost. So this is another disaster. You had the plague. People say that the fire, in fact, got rid of the plague. It killed all the rats. I don't think that's exactly true, but it's a nice story. Then later in about 1720, there was a great storm in the south of England, lasted a couple of days, and thousands of sailors lost their lives. Hundreds of these large ships like this were sank. And they even found a ship, probably a small one, but they found a ship 100 miles inland. That's how far the seawater went. It's unbelievable, 100 miles for a ship. Anyway, so it was an enormous storm of the century. Another issue we had was to do with Catholicism. And this is actually a picture in Prague. And it shows the people with the hats are Protestants, and the person by the window is a Catholic, and they throw him out the window out of a 2nd-story building. This is called defenestration, and it was quite common form of lynching, throwing people out of windows or off the parapet of the over the over the battlements of a fort. It's a way of killing people. Actually, these two people didn't die. They survived the fall. But it's said that the defenestration of Prague started the 30 Years' War. Another issue they had was with investment scandals. And again, this is a Hogarth picture. Tons of interesting information here. So previously I showed on the first picture the monument. This is the basement of the monument, which commemorated the Great Fire of England, but he's changed it. It says the monument represents the, I can't quite read it, but it was the South Sea bubble. People were investing in a company that is investing in the South Seas, meaning the South Atlantic, mainly South America, looking for gold and taking slaves there from Africa and Jamaica to South America to work on farms. So what happened was that over a period of 1 year, 1719 to 1720, there was a rush in investing in this the South Sea Company. And the picture here shows investors who are being taken for a ride. You know, literally we say now taken for a ride. This is, and people are climbing to get on, even though it's a scam. And the share price went from £1 to £100 in a very short time. Well, £1 was more than the average person made in a week. They would be probably getting 10, 12 shillings, which is £0.50, in a week. As the share price started at £1 and it went up to £100. Up here, you can't read it, but it's actually women who are single looking for husbands who were investors in the market because they thought they were wealthy people. This is the devil, and he's cheering everybody on. Even next to a person who's committed suicide, he's saying, "Oh, buy more shares, buy more shares." People are getting whipped at the wheel, whipped over here. This person helping has got the feet of a goat, which was a sign for the devil in those days. And on the left-hand side, even priests were involved in gambling. Here they're gambling dice, and you've got a Catholic, a Protestant, and a Jewish rabbi with his breastplate on. They're also gambling. You know, just so much information in, you know, how up here there's wild animals waiting to jump on the people. So the South Sea bubble made thousands of people bankrupt, including actually mainly the aristocracy, the rich people who could afford to buy it. And the last thing, I think this is the last picture, isn't it? Just quickly forward. Okay, so St. Paul's Cathedral was completely burnt to the ground. The original one was a mixture of stone and wood, and they said during the fire, the lead on the roof, it was so hot, the lead on the roof melted and ran like water in the streets. Well, lead melts at something like 1,200 degrees. So it just shows you how hot it was. Anyway, so they rebuilt this. They completed in 1714, I believe, and it's built by Sir Christopher Wren, designed by Christopher Wren. And this is one of the start of the operative Masons opening lodges. So next to this, in St. Paul's Churchyard, which is a road down the side here, was one of the first 4 operative lodges of Freemasonry. And I believe that the manual workers who were part of a builder's guild used to assemble here like a workman's club. Other wealthy people came up to London and bought up this land because there was nothing there. They were able to, and one of the areas was Jury Lane, which is just probably a mile down to the left here, where now it's all theatres, but in those days it was just clear land. So wealthy people bought up land and they built big houses. behind this St. Paul's, probably half a mile to the north, other aristocrats started building mansions. So you're probably familiar with Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace was originally just the Duke of Buckingham's townhouse. He had a house in the country, and this was his townhouse. So the General Marlborough, Marlborough also had a townhouse, and that's now Hyde Park Corner. And so all these rich houses, big houses, nowadays they're all museums and being converted to other uses. But those days, they had large houses with 200-300 rooms. They took a long time to build and so forth, so they needed more masons. So after the fire of London, thousands of masons came to London looking for work, and they built the first 3 lodges. The 4th lodge was built by, was opened near the Houses of Parliament in the city of Westminster, where all the aristocrats lived. And that's where John de Sagulier and George Payne, they were past masters there. They came over to the city. They came over to these, the 3 other lodges in this area, which would be the Goose and Gridiron. And they met at the Apple Tree, which was near Covent Garden. That was another, Covent Garden was another investment by rich people. Covent Garden's just over here. And they met at the Apple Tree. So the lodge from the Horn, which was at the before previously being called the Rummer and Grapes. And we saw the grapes in my previous presentation when we looked at the Chinese order of the Gormagons. In the background, there was a sign showing grapes. I think it's a reference to the Rummer and Grapes. And so the Rummer and Grapes, which later became the Horn Tavern, where all the aristocrats were, joined with these 3 operative things. So my question is, why would aristocrats or gentry, who are basically educated people, why would they care what operative masons were doing? You know, I mean, in those days, the society was very structured, and gentry tended to be the people between the working class and the aristocracy, and they worked in between. So, for example, Christopher Wren, who built this, he was an architect, which meant he's gentry. He would talk to the operative masons. But the people who funded this, well, the king, of course, funded it, but any aristocrat like the Duke of Wellington would never talk to an operative mason. It wasn't even, you know, there was nothing to talk about. They were, English use a bad phrase, but they would call them peasants. You know, they had no education. They had a skill. They could build buildings, but you know, they couldn't talk about philosophy. They didn't know any mathematics. You know, there was nothing they could learn from. So there was this gap, and the gentry filled that gap. So my question is, why did the first 3 Grand Masters think it was important to join with them to set up a Grand Lodge? And I explain that in my book. You know, so another interesting thing that happened, so all these calamities, we have the fire, the plague, the great storm, we had the Catholic problems, we had all the superstition. A lot of this changed with the setting up of the Royal Society in 1660. And so this shows, this is the first, I forget his name now, Berkeley. He's a lord. He was the first president of the Royal Society. This is King Charles II. It's written down in Latin as Carolinus II, but Carolinus means Charles. And this is Bacon, Francis Bacon. He was a Lord Chancellor, and a lot of other things. The reason he's here is because the Royal Society wanted to promote Bacon's ideas of what they call, you know, scientific thinking. So they wanted to get away from the idea of superstition and myth and mythology. Those days, even science and mathematics was taught based on books that have been written 500 years before. The theology of the day was 500 years old. So the Royal Society said, let's stop, let's start. And you see all these mathematical instruments in the background, squares and things, and for measuring and whatever, and there's all these books. That's what they wanted the future to be. And so this was the beginning of the Enlightenment, basically. So in 1723, the constitutions of the Premier Grand Lodge, later to become the Grand Lodge of England, were written, drawn up. And these are the first two aristocratic leaders, Grand Masters, leaders, sorry. And this, I think, here is probably, I'm not sure, but this is John de Sagulier, definitely. So there's some interesting things about this picture. First of all, we have the five orders of architecture, but there's a bridge. Now, I don't think this refers to Royal Arch, because the Royal Arch wasn't first. There was an article about the Royal Arch in 1725 in a magazine, but this is 1723. This is, don't know where to start. There's so much. No, first there are two people. These feathers on the top here indicate that he's a member of the Garter. So he has a garter. You can see his garter, I think, on this side, on his left leg. So he was a member of the Society, not Society of the Garter, what is it? Order of the Garter. So the Order of the Garter is probably the highest order that can be given to people who are in England. And I believe there are only 20 people at one time who are members. So this is Duke of Montague, and he's a member of the Order of the Garter, and he's got this feathers which show he's a duke. This person here is Montague. He's the second, sorry, this is Wharton. He's the second Grand Master, and he's accepting the constitutions, and he's got his ducal crown on, and he's wearing ermine. Ermine's a sign of a duke. This person is a complete fraud. I mean, he's just an embarrassment to Freemasonry. But anyway, so he wasn't elected. He elected himself and then told everybody to vote for himself. Is kind of phony. Never mind, but that's the history. What's particularly interesting about this picture is at the bottom, I keep losing my mouse, here we are. The Pythagorean theorem is now part of the third degree, and at the bottom it says Eureka. So we all know that's from the third degree, but this is 1723, and the third degree wasn't announced for another 2 years. So it suggests to me that even at this time, they were thinking about the third degree, but they hadn't announced it. So they put a little hint in here. Otherwise, it just makes no sense at all, because it's 1723, and they only had a 2-degree ritual at the time. So now we think in alchemical terms and what they were trying to achieve. And so I look in quite detail of the alchemy of the time. And this is the traditional idea of alchemy, the triangle, which is a spiritual triangle, the square, the circle, and the greater circle. And so you have positive and negative energy inside a square. The square, just like now, represents Earth, because on Earth, only on Earth can you have corners. There are no corners in the universe. The universe is circular like this. And so everything in the universe is circular. All the planets and stars are circular, and they move in circular motion through the universe. It's only on Earth that we have squares. But then we have the spiritual triangle. It's not actually, what do you call it? Equilateral with equal corners. It's just a circle. So I'm not sure if that actually means something or not. But anyway, so God is said to be omniscient, omnipotent, and all-knowing, all-seeing, and all-powerful. So that's why he's got the three sides. And so this is the alchemist trying to understand the relationships between universe, God, man, negative and positive energies. And we go down to here. This is the traditional idea of an alchemist. It's an alchemist. He had in his alchemical laboratory, one side he has a furnace, and these are all the alchemical bottles and components. He has his table, or his bench where he works, and then he has somewhere to pray. And so at the time in England, it was both superstitious but very religious. So everything they did had to have the blessing of God. And when you look at this picture, this is actually not a very good example of this. It's by Kunrath. Unfortunately, you can't see the detail, but here there's Latin words. There are Latin words written into the beams. There's Latin here, around here. This is Latin. Going up and down the curtain is Latin. There's Latin here. This smoke has got Latin in it. It's got Latin on the table. These are all kind of blessings taken from the Bible to help the alchemist succeed in his work. And so this interest in alchemy, I believe, is the reason we have a third degree. So in alchemy, everything's done in threes. And so even the furnace, this is a triple furnace. You have three furnaces, and it has three levels. So the three was so important in alchemy. I believe that they decided they had to have a third degree. And a lot of we saw in the previous, this is the masculine, this is the female triangle. This represents fire, this represents water, and this is the seal of Solomon. It's the mixture of the two, fire and water combined. So alchemy was to do with what they called the ennobling of the metals. The idea was to take the lowest metal, which was lead, and then raise it through tin, copper, what else is it? I forget. Quicksilver, silver, gold. So gold was the perfect, and gold was represented by the sun. And underneath here are the 7 elements of these golds. So this would be lead, tin, copper, etc., sitting around in a circle. They're underground because all these metals were dug out of the ground. And so using fire and water and the spiritual energy of King Solomon's seal, you could succeed in alchemy. This is, what should we say? This is, forget the word, laboratory alchemy, not spiritual alchemy. So we go to the next page, we can see. So sorry, I forgot to mention, this is the cover, the inside frontispiece of a book called the Museum Hermeticum, which was a book which contained, I think, 5 other alchemical texts, and it was republished just before something like 1660, 1670, but it was very popular textbook for alchemy. And I think the first Grand Masters would have known of this. Inside one of the texts was this. And here we got the ladder again, and we got the 2 angels going up and down. Now, this is interesting because this here, Mutus Liber means the quiet book, or the book quiet, but I don't think it means quiet in not sounding, but it just means hidden or secret teachings book, but it means like mute, unable to talk. It's a book without words, it's just pictures. I think there's 16 of them. But what's interesting is here, because it's written in mirror writing. So to read it, you have to reflect it in a mirror. This is typical alchemical way of doing things. And it gives 3 quotations from the Bible, which also all talk about Jew and the ladder. And now Jew is very important because it's the quintessential element. When you want to make gold, you had to have some special element to convert what you're using. And in those days, a lot of people believed Jew was that prima materia. This is another picture, which I believe was a hint how to design the first lodges for a speculative lodge. I kind of find my mouse. My mouse keeps disappearing. So this picture called conjunction, we have water, fire, air, and earth. So these are the 4 elements. We have the zodiac, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They've been crammed into 270 degrees. Where's the rest of it? You know, so it's missing. Around here, these are all the virtues, and one of them, not quite sure. So the sword, they've all got swords, flames, and she's got a sheath of wheat. He's got the scythe. She's got a burning heart. These are all meant to be virtues. And on the top is Mercury. Inside this sacred mountain are the 7 steps of alchemy. So it started what they call calcination, sublimation, making a solution, and burning it, and then converting it. So those days, there were 3 prima materia which were used in alchemy, and I believe those are the 3 steps in the lodge, followed by the 5 steps of the different colors the material changed into. They call it citrinus, albedo, negredo, cauda pavonis. So you had yellow, white, black, red, yellow, and I said yellow twice, didn't I? So black, white, yellow, red, and cauda pavonis is a multicolor looking like the tail of a peacock. And so that is the 5 colors and the 7 steps. This represents the 3, 5, 7 steps in a lodge. Inside the lodge, you can see a furnace again, a man and a woman. This is positive and negative energy. And above him is a ceiling covered in stars and the sun. And top is the phoenix, and the phoenix is the sacred bird of alchemy, because it dies in fire and is resurrected from fire. So it's a symbol for immortality. At the bottom, you've got the blindfolded candidate and another person who's chasing a rabbit into a hole. This is a symbol for somebody is not successful in his alchemical studies. He's just been chasing rabbits down holes. This is the querent, the candidate, approaching the lodge, and he's blindfolded. He's got to go up the 7 steps. So I believe this is the origin of the kind of concept of the lodge. You've got the virtues, you've got the sun going through the zodiac, you've got the darkness in the north because the sun doesn't go, the zodiac stops here. You've got the blindfolded candidate and all these symbols. So in the 3rd degree, this is a picture from the 1800s from Duncan's Masonry. This is the killing of Hiram. You can see he's got a gavel in his hand. Now we use a setting maul, but in those days there was, I think that correctly it should be a gavel, because it's one of the working tools of Masons. The setting maul doesn't appear in the ritual anywhere, but it does appear in the story about Roslin Chapel. Roslin Chapel was built in the 1400s by a Scottish operative Grand Master, And there's a story there where one of the workmen is killed by his overseer, struck on the head using a setting maul. And I think they wanted to get the two stories to combine to bring in the idea of Rosslyn Chapel being part of the ancient history of Freemasonry, which of course it isn't, because speculative Freemasonry started in 1717. Everything was rewritten, all degrees, the 2 degrees were rewritten, and a third was added. So it's totally original. And that kind of brings it to a summary. So this lecture was brought to you by Spiritual Alchemy and the Quest for Immortality. I'm on Facebook, YouTube. If you've just put that in, you'll find me. So that's then I just click out, don't I? Is it this one? That one.
Thank you, Brother Christopher. That was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. And you know what I keep doing? I firstly, I have to admit, I have been watching your YouTube channel, I think, from the get-go, from the time you have been making YouTube videos for years and years and years now.
So it's actually 3 years. It feels longer, 3 years.
It feels, but it's been a long time for me, and a lot of videos and a lot of information. And I have also shared your wonderful videos with many of our brethren in India on numerous occasions.
Thank you.
I find them absolutely mind expansive and so detailed that even when I sit down to ask a question, I have to think, because you've already answered the question. You're so thorough. You know, I mean, something will pop into my mind, and even the Phoenix, when you were speaking about the primer materia, and I was like, wow, that's the Phoenix. And as you promptly went in, like you read my mind, you explained to me, this is the Phoenix. And the Phoenix is something that I have been searching for in the understanding of Freemasonry, because we see the eagle, we see the double-headed eagle, we see all these Scottish Rite symbols. But do we understand the roots of where the Scottish Rite symbol came from, or these eagles come from? So the Phoenix is something that I really associate with, that has been brought to beautiful attention over here. Thank you so much for that.
In my new book about the Royal Arch, I talk about the Royal Arch. My feeling is that Freemasonry was perfect with the 3 degrees. It taught you how to become immortal, how to experience immortality in your lifetime without dying. You know, you could have an out-of-body experience, which in those days must have felt like magic to those people. They didn't know much about it. And you know, when you said, "Oh, your spirit can leave, it can go around the garden and come back again," they must have thought they were crazy. But the 3rd degree actually shows you how you can experience it. So for that reason, the 3rd degree answers the problem about the quest for immortality that everybody was, you know, talking about. And it uses a Chinese technique, which was, you know, is very complicated, but people have been doing it for thousands of years in China and in India as well. And out of body was not something to be scared of, but nobody knew about it in those days. What they did know about was stories about Catholic priests who were able to fly. They were able to float up into the sky. There are lots of stories about that. I put it in my book. So the leap, you know, in the concept is not so great. But on the other side, the operative Freemasons, who became the ancient Grand Lodge, then all these other rituals were developed, and one of them was Royal Arch, was the idea to make it the 4th degree, because the 3rd degree finishes King Solomon's temple is not complete, the Grand Master is dead, and we have not found the lost word. So it's incomplete, but that's fine. That's all you don't need anymore. But people who didn't understand the deeper teaching about the astral travel and stuff thought, no, we got to make another one. So they made the Royal Arch to make the 4th degree to complete it. And it, to me, it shows that people didn't really understand what was going on.
So that essentially what you're trying to say is that the Royal Arch degree is maybe not as not essentially part of the 3 rungs.
It's different because so 3 degrees are mostly in the mind. So we're inside King Solomon's temple, but there is no temple. You move from 2nd from the outer chamber to the middle chamber to outside the sanctum sanctorum, nothing's changed. We're not changed up. But in the Royal Arch, they wear clothes, they wear crowns, and they got all these robes. We don't have it in the 3 degrees because you don't need it. It's an intellectual journey. But in Royal Arch and all the other degrees, Scottish Rite and York Rite, they all get dressed up and they have swords and all sorts, and they have props, and they have inside the lodge, they put props up. It shows you it's more theatrical. We didn't need the theatre. It was the first 3 degrees are so well crafted, I suppose the word is that it's all in the mind. You can see it. It's an intellectual journey. So even though the King Solomon's Temple wasn't completed, it didn't need to be completed. This whole thing was completed.
So in a way, the 4th degree that we look at could also be perceived as a personal degree amongst the brethren who have done the 3rd degree. May not be considered as a 4th degree. It's essentially the 1st degree of our degrees. In a way, after we've learned the initiation, we start our 1st degree.
Right. So the 3rd degree, the Royal Arch, I believe, was basically an Irish tradition, and it may have been a religious tradition because it was quite common to have processions in the road carrying crosses and arches and flowers and things. And I think the operative Freemasons, they wanted something special, and they developed the Royal Arch as a theatrical thing because it's based on the Bible. It's a biblical story, and so it's actually about building a physical temple in the desert, and they're actually building a temple. That's not the objective of the 3rd degree. Was to build a temple in your heart, to somewhere to meet God. That's what it's all about, and if the 3rd degree is up to you to build. So once you're a 3rd degree Mason and you're perfected, having gone up the ladder, Christ has drawn you up, you are perfected. Now you build your temple in your heart, not somewhere in the desert, digging holes and things. That's just theatrical. So it shows that the operative Masons didn't really understand. I think basically it's competition, because they were getting they were getting money from people, yes, and there were many complaints about the cost of membership, being 7 shillings and 6 pence, and people stealing the money. The master would collect the fees and just run, and they were making money. Both of them were making money. So, it's once you start, it's pretty difficult to stop, I think. But basically, the higher degrees have lost the spiritual thread of what the first 3 grandmasters made, and so that's why
in a way, the patronage we're talking about over here. So there was maybe in Freemasonry itself, as you have to have 2 sectors to run. Not everything can be run with the left side of the brain, only the right side of the brain, right? So we need two hemispheres of the brain, just the way everything we do in life. We need a balance. So it's basically a clash between our inner self and our outer self, our creative self, who are members of the creative arts, and the members of the financial arts, who are the magicians who can materialize the material world.
I would put it differently. I would put it the operative Mason had a membership who were religious. They were Catholics. But on the other side, the Premier Grand Lodge were not Catholics. They were Protestants, and they were more philosophical.
Okay. So in the modern era, we could say it's adapted from that aspect into probably a more economic structure than we would perceive as it was there. So economics has sort of taken the place of religion in a way, as a hierarchy of structure.
Yeah, maybe
in the modern world.
It was a place for people to make connections, meet people, have fun. They used to sing songs and have lots of banquets. They all got drunk all the time. So it had a social purpose, but I think the higher degrees, people often say Scottish Rite is the university of Freemasonry. It just teaches you in more detail what you should have learnt in the first 3 degrees.
Also, I wanted to highlight. Jay, please, Sanjay.
Yeah, Chris.
I can't see you, Sanjay.
You want to see
I can
me
see
on
your
Yeah,
camera?
dog.
please.
Your dog is so
That's not.
cute.
There we go.
No. My dogs, the other three are there. We'll discuss that after the recording is done. Uh, okay. You spoke about the operative and then subsequently on this speculative. Uh, my take on this is slightly different. I'll just share that with you. You might agree, you might not agree. Man, whenever he has had his thoughts and he wanted to express his thoughts, he has always gone and written something on a paper or on a tablet or something and expressed his thoughts. Somewhere in the medieval times or up to the 15th century or the early 16th or 17th century, till that stage, going back in past to even right up to the time the pyramids were built, man's expression was of thought was through architecture, and that is the reason why the operative masonry thrived, and the operative masons grew up in strength to strength, and it started spreading across many parts of the world. Over a period of time, the number of constructions or number of such buildings dwindled, and after the ancient free and the grand lodge started in 1717, and then the trade union act or the pact that made out in 1790s killed the guilds per se, which probably could have diminished or could have relegated operative masonry to the second rung, and the speculative masonry could have taken up. And over the years, when operative masonry had tried to reinvent itself, but found that they were fighting a kind of a waging a losing battle against speculative masonry, so they adopted to the speculative masonry, by bringing in the concepts of the operative masonry of building your own temple, knocking yourself off, knocking your knobs and excrescences, and so that you become a perfect temple. And as St. Paul put it, the Spirit of God dwelleth inside you, you are the living temple. Would you like to add something to it? Is my line of thinking correct?
Well, yes, I tend to be a little bit pragmatic about these things. As you say, that in the 1100s in Europe to about 1300s, there was a rush of building cathedrals all over Europe, and like Notre Dame in Paris. And many historians believe that is because the Templars were able to fund it. They were lending money to the church to build all these, and the Templars didn't build it, they lent the money and the church had them built. But then the Templars were prosecuted and persecuted in 1413, I think it was, 13, and then Jacques d'Arc was, not Jacques d'Arc, Jacques de Molay.
1308.
Yes, 13, 8, 14. Yes, somewhere around there. So when this fell apart, the main work for the stonemasons moved to making smaller churches and country houses and into England. And one of the unique things about masons in England, well, not just masons, but everybody, there was a law that once, if you were born into a mason's family, you could not take any other work. So when the demand for masons diminished, as you mentioned, there's nothing they can do. They couldn't become farmers. They couldn't become plasterers or bricklayers because they were masons, and they were, that was it. The only thing they could do is move around the country looking for work. And it's recorded in the 1600s that these itinerant masons were causing a lot of trouble, and they're often getting into fights, and they were getting arrested because they didn't have any money, so they're probably drinking. People who don't have money always have money to drink. It's very strange. Anyway, so they were fighting, and they were looked down upon. And so this is the situation just before the Premier Grand Lodge set up in 1717. They were a kind of unruly lot of people, and they tended to be Scottish and Irish because there's a lot of prejudice against these people in England at the time due to the law. So does that answer your question?
Yes, of course. Of
Yes.
course it does.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So my feeling is the operative Masons were manual workers. They were, they were Catholics. Scotland and Ireland was Catholic. England was Protestant. So the operative Masons were Catholics. They were workers, manual workers, so different from the speculative Masons, we call them moderns, who I give a list of the membership of the Horn Lodge in 17, when was it? 1724, I think it is. And there were princes from Germany, there were dukes, there were a lot of famous people, there were generals. This is so different from the membership of the operative lodges, totally different. So there had to be something really interesting to get these people. So in those days, we didn't have lodges. We rented a room above a public house, an ale house or tavern. And that's why they took on the name of the tavern. So the lodge at the Horn Tavern, well, it was just people who met at the Horn Tavern. It wasn't the name of the lodge. They didn't have numbers or anything. They identified by where they met to have their meetings. And they would rent a room above the tavern, and afterwards they go down and have a drink. So, a tavern was a pretty rowdy place, people drinking and even fighting. There'd be lots of prostitutes in there looking for business. So to get a duke or a prince or the future king of Germany to meet with other people on the second floor above a tavern, something really special had to entice them. And that's what I think, people kind of miss this, when I was talking about people's social rank, it was very strict in those days. And so for that level of person to meet and to talk about things, at nighttime. And the other thing, in my book, I show that it's very dangerous in London at that time. People used to get attacked in the streets, robbed, and a rich person would drive around in a carriage, but you'd have two footmen on the back. People nowadays believe, well, that he's there to open the door. No, the footmen there were to protect. They would fight anyone who attacked the coach. And again, Hogarth has this great etching, which I give a copy of in my book, of a master leaving a lodge at nighttime at the same time as a coach is being attacked by robbers. I'm just flicking through to see if I can. Is it this book or the other book? No, it's not this book. It's I've got a lot of information. I keep forgetting which book has what in it. Oh dear. Yeah, the picture's way too small. You can't put it up. You couldn't quite see it. That's a master. You can see his square. He's holding the tiler is holding a lantern, and you can see this master's got his apron on and square, and in the background, just there, a coach is being set on fire and being attacked by a mob of people. Now that was the tavern, which was near the Houses of Parliament. This was in the rich part of town, not in the poor part of town, 2 miles away, where you'd expect that. So, even in the rich area, people were getting attacked. And there's a story about 1750, the Prime Minister's son was attacked in a coach. Well, the Prime Minister would obviously have good security, but again, they were highwaymen on horseback, robbers on horseback. They would attack you in the park. If you try to take a shortcut across the park to get to, for example, Kensington Palace, there were people on horseback waiting to attack you. So it was a violent time. There were calamities, there were disease, there were fires, and England was at war all the time. Just that people forget. We were fighting the Spanish, we were fighting the French, we were fighting the Dutch. it was really tough time, really tough time. So
A lot of
in the
high
middle of
tension
this,
at that time was going on. A lot
sorry?
of high tension. A lot of high tension was happening at that time.
Well, of course. I mean, that's you know, when you're at war and you've got disease, and then you have civil war. We just had a civil war in England, it lasted 11 years. The Catholics and the French were fighting. We were fighting the Catholics. We had, in a time of Queen Elizabeth, which is like 100 years before, the Spanish Armada are trying to invade England, but we were able to fight the Armada off. But we were surrounded by Catholic countries. You had Scotland in the north, Ireland in the west, France and the Spanish Netherlands in the sort of south and east. So this Protestant country was covered. Any day now, the Catholics would invade. That's what they thought would happen. So as you say, there was tension. Yeah. So in the middle of this, people got together to make a spiritual organization to learn how to experience immortality in their lifetime, as it says in the apocryphal book of the Bible, and you wouldn't die. You know, it's just a marvelous story. I hope my story is correct. I don't know.
Also, you spoke about the Mutus Liber.
Yes.
Yes. So the quiet book, or you said the book of, I would interpret it maybe as the book of silence.
Yeah.
Could be. So there's also a practice in Buddhism called the meditation of the white flower. So the meditation of the white flower is basically where you remain silent and you meditate, and the whole meditation procedure is deep silence, essentially. No sound, nothing, you know. So could you explain to me a bit more about this aspect of it with relation to how Freemasonry was taken? Because you'd also mentioned the golden flower,
yeah,
which was the third degree, and it was essentially an extract. This is a very important part. So the secret of the golden flower, yeah.
Yes, so this is very similar to your white flower. This is a very deep meditation where you learn to move your energy around your body until you can get what the Chinese call qi energy, your essential energy, and you have certain techniques for moving it around the body. It's a 15-step process, so it's a little bit complicated, but eventually it comes to a point where it comes up into the brain. There's the bright pearl, gives it more energy, and then it bursts out through the top of your head. And so this is one of 3 books I talk about. So I just dropped one. One of 3 books I talk about.
A white pearl energy that appears in the head. So essentially, again, we're talking about the opening of the crown chakra.
Yes, and then it lights up. The light is internally, you're full of bright light and energy, and then you know that your chi is ready to leave the body. It's one of 3 books. The other one, which is also this Museum Hermeticum, had lots of alchemical books in it, and another one it had in there is an interesting one. See if I can see, where is it called? Spiritual. Oh yeah, it's called. The book of lambskin, and so sorry, lambspring. Yes. So I believe the white apron we have, which we call a lambskin, is actually a pun on this book called a lambspring, which is also another alchemical text about joining the male and female, like we had in the Chinese, joining the male and the female to make the perfect energy. And so, because they say that in Freemasonry, they say that the lambskin is a symbol of, what was it? Innocence. Actually, it's not the lambskin, it's the lamb itself is a symbol of innocence, and it's also a symbol of Christ. It's over years. It's not the lambskin, it's the lamb itself. So this is what I call steganography. Steganography is, the whole of this book is about steganography. It's about writing a secret message encoded inside another text. So you have to have a surface text, which then teaches another. So when if you realize that lambskin is referring to the book of lambskin, you go and look at the book of lambskin and see what it's all about. And that's how you learn. The The book of Revelation is the same. And that's what I translated. Well, I didn't translate it. I interpreted it. Here is it here.
You had also given us, I remember in one of your lectures, you had spoken about 3 specific books that were directly related to alchemy, and that you said you would advise to read. Could you just bring those up again?
Well, it wasn't actually advised to read them. It was just the fact that the Grand Masters alluded to them in the ritual. And so the, let's see, spiritual alchemy. So the Museum Hermeticum contains all 3 books. And where am I here? Alchemy, 3 important texts. So, it gets to be, let's see, 97. Okay. So, yes, it's look at the Emerald Tablet. His history. Where are we? Resurrection, Chinese alchemy. So the Desert Alchemy, Isaac Newton. Before Freemasonry, and also probably before the time of the Royal Society, people who actually tried to make gold, they're called puffers, because they puff air into the alchemical stove to make it really hot. It had to be, like 1,000 degrees Celsius. So they had to puff, and it's a lot of hard work. After that became, then this had been going on for about 200 years in England, in Europe, and they realized whatever you did, you cannot make lead into gold. So the puffers kind of just disappeared. But Newton was one of the last one, and Newton had his own alchemical stove in his garden. And one of the reasons that they believe that he went mad, because mercury, if you heat it up, the fumes of mercury will make somebody, well, it can kill you. It's poisonous. And you go mad first and then you die later. So Masonry comes at that cusp between the puffers and the spiritual alchemists. So one of the books we just mentioned is Mutus Liber. And Mutus Liber has that ladder on the front and the mirror writing talking about sweet dew and things like this. Dew is also used in the Chinese as well. They talk about dew, they call it sweet dew, and it's part of the energy going around, and it becomes, your saliva changes because the saliva is swallowed and it becomes sweet dew. You move it around inside you. The second book is, I showed the 3 stoves. That comes from the 12 Keys of Basil Valentine. And then you have the third one, which is the Book of Lamb Spring, which is a really strange book. It only has images in it. I don't recommend people read them because they're all pictures. And so, they were, I think the Book of Lamb Spring only has like 2 lines in it, And so looking at the pictures, it's very easy to misunderstand what they were trying to explain. People will think, they're still trying to make gold or something, but it's not true. It's much deeper. They're much more spiritual. And it's for people who studied alchemy, most of it's taught by word of mouth. And the pictures were just to stimulate conversation. So studying it can be misleading.
What do you believe is the essence of alchemy? Because obviously gold was not the essence. It was just a tool for maybe the lower degrees to understand and basically study the elements and how to manipulate them. But what do you believe immortality is the goal? So
the spiritual alchemy is to show that we are immortal beings. So it's Chinese. There's several ways of doing it. There's a Chinese way, there's a European way. The Chinese one's actually written down in a book, so we know about it. But I believe that Swedenborg, you may have known him, he's a spiritual writer, from about 1730. He was writing about leaving his body and going into angelic realms and talking to angels and having all these great, wonderful experiences. He wrote about it in his book. I believe he learnt it from the Freemasons, because he was a Freemason himself. He knew he was in London at the same time as the third degree was being developed. So he probably meeting the same people, talking about the same things. He said, okay, I'm going to practice that, what the Chinese, I'm going to go and do it. And that's what he did do. It took him 5 or 6 years, and then he started writing about it. And he had these really interesting experiences, which are all described in the book of The Golden Flower.
A lot of these people, while doing these experiments, must have actually, a lot of people may have died also trying to do these experiments.
No, I don't
Philosophers
think
that no one passed away. This
in
is very dangerous dealing with these sort of things.
Spiritual alchemy is never dangerous. You either succeed or don't succeed. That's it. It depends on your frame of mind. It's rather like you mentioned the white flower meditation. You just don't sit down. You have to practice. You have to study it. But Puffer, the real type of alchemy, many people died. Rufus Magus, he blew up his house. He and his friend died in his house. Rufus Magus is a famous Richard Carlyle, I think his name is. He blew up his whole house. So it could be dangerous, yes. But for spiritual alchemy, no, it's not dangerous at all. And in fact, it's very exciting. And I think it's something that everybody should learn how to do, because you learn that you are a spiritual being having a physical experience. This body, I'm just borrowing it for 60, 80 years. I'm not this body. I identify with it, which is totally wrong, but I am not this body. I am a spiritual being. And I don't know if you've ever had an out-of-body experience. Have you had one? Well, you will know when you look back at yourself, you know that you are spirit. You are mortal. And that's what they were teaching. You just leave your body once, you are immortal. And then suddenly nothing means anything. Gender identity, your nationality, your religion, none of it means anything once you know that you're a spirit. You go to heaven, you said, well, where is God? Where is the heaven? Where is the road paved in gold? There's none of that, But it's you realize that you are not just immortal, but you are limitless. In Japanese, they call it mugen. You have no limit. You can go future, past. You go wherever you want. I mean, there's just no limit at all. You can go to Mars, Moon. It's all in your mind. Suddenly, you become omnipotent, omniscient.
Also, the human body creates a chemical reaction. We are a form of alchemy itself. So when we attune to things, we manifest a form of alchemy at that point. So yeah, completely. We are also ourselves, I believe, in our own being, we are ourselves gateways. So portals that can be activated, because we hold huge amounts of energy, which is stored. We have huge amounts of capacity for information. Forget about what we use generally in life. But the amount of brain space that is there could, fill all the books in the world, like 2-3 times could fit into one person's brain, So there's a lot of, lack of use over here, as you say. And I guess that's the alchemical process for the human being, is to open up these dimensions and to basically break into our body and create that form.
The thing is, you're not actually going out, you're actually going in. You go inside your body, eat deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, but yeah, yes, many people have written about the pineal gland as being that gateway. A friend of mine wrote the book The Opening Eye, and he talks about, like Descartes. Descartes said it was the seat of the soul, but yes, we are very, very powerful. So it brings up all sorts of other things. For example, we should never be ill, because we have the power to heal ourselves. So why do we become ill? Because we lost our spirituality. We've got too focused on physical things, on having things, owning things, cars and whatever. We don't need that. We need to know, to remember that we are spiritual beings. And then once it comes out, not only can we heal ourselves, we can heal other people. We can know the future and the past. You know, so then we become what we should really be, spiritual beings. And so it's no coincidence I called my series Spiritual Freemasonry, you know, because that's what I believe it's all about. What is happening?
That's how I found you, because I believed that Freemasonry was spiritual, and I typed in spiritual Freemasonry, and you popped up. So I meant 3 years ago. That's how I found you.
Thank you. Yes, well, that's what I'm trying to sell. But I think it's because in 1660 the Royal Society was the other way around. They totally disregarded religion, and in fact it became a source of contention with the society and the clergy at the time, that religion was being excluded from all kind of the new learning. And so the Royal Society was studying insects and animals and all sorts of things, but unlike the old days, God was not part of it. Yes, so Freemasonry became the counterpart to Royal Society. It became a spiritual society, and many of the same people were in both. People who were Freemasons, even Grand Masters, were in the Royal Society. So you had the two sides of the equation: the spiritual and the intellectual, or the scientific.
Wow, very nice, very nice. Thank you so much. The last thing is the mirror. I love the mirror concept of reflection. Also in the Scottish Rite, there's something called the Room of Reflections, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So this is a very important part for all of us to step into, I think, from Enochian magic also. So the reflection of the black mirror, or the mirror, and perceiving of ourselves and how we perceive ourselves in reality is something that's very key to spiritual Freemasonry and the alchemy of it.
Unfortunately, most people join for the networking nowadays. That's sad, but reality.
Well, thank you, Christopher. It's been absolutely amazing and mind-blowing, as I would say. And would you like to finish off with anything and give us any last inputs? We'll put all the details of your book and all the different websites and links, including your YouTube channel, in the description below. Is there anything you'd like to close with?
Well, you know, you can only know how far you can go by actually going. So doing it, you know, talking about immortality is one thing, but actually practicing, you know, is another thing. So that's how I finished my other book. My book on Royal Arch completes the series, talks about astral projection, how they thought about it in those days. So I encourage everybody to look into it.
Also, we're looking forward to your new book that hopefully will come out on the 5th degree of Freemason and spirituality, where you can give us a ritual for that as well. You know, as they say, now it'll be our 2nd degree after our first 3 degrees over, the new batch. So let's wrap this up. Thank you so much for your time. So I'd like to finish this by saying that, you know, any feedbacks or updates you want to give us in the comments below, that would be amazing. And thanks, and a hearty thanks to all the brethren and visitors who joined us on today's episode. We hope that you found something special and informative. We look forward to interacting with you through our social media handles, where you can express your opinions, views, or even queries about Freemasonry. Links are in the description below. So join us next time for an all-new episode. Until then, please hit that subscribe button. Show us a thumbs up if you liked it, or if you didn't like it, give us a comment. Join us on the next Masonic Time, next Masonic channel. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.